shores of the island. I'm sure that St. Lucians in the diaspora, they have been glued to social media, television, radio, monitoring what has been happening in St. Lucia, and in particular those people in that community. Mr. Leader of the Opposition and MP for Micoud South, when you became the MP in 2016, how soon after that you were made aware of this particular situation?
I wasn't, but we had similar situations in the constituency, you know, in Wishpa and Angers, and as Prime Minister throughout the length and the breadth of this country. You know, the land titling project in 1984 was intended to resolve a lot of these different issues, and sadly it has not. And how you deal with it becomes very problematic, because I think it's important for all of us to understand that both parties genuinely believe they own the land, right, and are adamant that they own the land. And unfortunately, the only mechanism that we have of resolving that issue is in the court. And the court, as you know, is not the fastest way of making this happen. This is a court case that started many, many years ago. The first conclusion of the court case, if I'm not mistaken, was 2007. A follow-up in 2012, and then finally court orders by 2019, 2020, 2021, and now 2022. So this was not a fast process, very, very long process. And despite the outcome of the court case, there were still parties who genuinely believed that they were wronged. So we're not satisfied with the results. So it puts government in a very precarious situation. So if I just stray away from that one for the moment and use other examples of where there were family members, and one family member ended up getting control of a property. Government then went in, acquired the land, what was being recommended, to give back to the other family members, and then they have to pay for it. And they're saying, why do I have to pay for it? We own the land, right? Now, once government starts getting involved in selling land, and more importantly, if in fact houses were destroyed and you were going to have to rebuild the houses, and government was going to be rebuilding the houses for them, it's going to have to be to a standard accepted by DCA. Septic tank, minimum size of space, minimum size of house, and so it becomes very, very expensive. The other concern that we have to have is, what precedents are we establishing? So if every single time that there are people who are squatting on private land, or found to be squatting on private land, is the solution every single time for government to acquire the land and then to sell to those persons? Now, are you encouraging people to be able to squat? Now, the case in Duga has elements of those, but there's not all of that. And I would say to you, the most distressing part of what has happened in Dugai are two families that know each other in a very small community, and there's pain on both sides, Tim. I can tell you. There's no winner in this. There was the pain for the persons who believe they own the land and were being wronged, and then there are persons who genuinely believe they own the land and the court said that they don't own the land, and now the houses have been broken down. And without proper counseling, that's going to linger and it spreads. So it means family members are against each other, then friends of family members are against each other in a very, very small community. And so I'm a huge advocate for local government and strengthening local government, including community development officers. Consultation could have been taking place much earlier in the game, but the reality is that neither party was willing to compromise. As I said to you, both parties genuinely believed that they own the land. The court has determined one person's own the land. So it's a very, very sad situation, Tim. But I would say to you, we need to focus right now on the reconciliation, continue to learn from these lessons and to see what kinds of policies we can put in place to prevent this from happening. But the biggest thing and the biggest concern I have is that this is a beautiful community, you know, Minel and Darren, two notable persons who come from that constituency, many, many, many more people who have come from the constituency, great people. And it's just very sad to see the fallout from all of this.
You are the MP for the area, and people are looking to their parliamentary representatives to always intercede on their behalf to address issues, no matter we might consider it to be trivial, personal, major, etc. You always turn to your MP. So at some point in time, I'm sure you would have heard about this particular incident. What effort did you play in trying to resolve it? Because you were also the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. Now, people see Prime Ministers as people having unlimited powers. So what effort did you employ in terms of trying to resolve this amicably?
We've been there. As I said to you, some of the parties had moved from the property, but it's a private matter. And as I said to you, even after the court decision, there were family members who were still very insistent and defiant in saying that they owned the land, right? So sadly, you want to just try to minimize the fallout, but the reality is there's very little that you can do.
But were you ever approached?
No.
No one ever approached you?
No, we knew the situation, and again, we knew it was in court, and we knew that it was being contested in court, right? But to say to you that it was a direct involvement one way or the other, there wasn't. This is a private matter, sadly, and government can give support in terms of identifying new lands for people, but nobody wanted to move.
But in hindsight, do you think you could have done more? What do you think you could have done?
Sure, you can always do more, is to bring both parties together to try to get them to reconcile the situation, and that to me was the most important intervention that we could possibly have done. But at the time, neither party was willing to sit down. There was a lot of emotion involved in this situation, and people took a very strong position. But I think that more community support in terms of trying to bring the parties together and trying to resolve the matter. But even sadly, you know, family members and friends are convinced of one side of the story being correct. So I don't want to say in any way that there's not more I could have done. There is always more that I could have done. But it was about just bringing the two parties together and insisting that that take place. But the reality is, until the court makes a final decision, and both parties are not willing to sit down and reconcile, it becomes very, very difficult to resolve the issue.
Even as we speak this evening, I'm sure there's several families who are going through similar situations. Maybe it has not reached a position where the court has ruled, but it's still before the courts, etc. And the problems are lingering. What do you think that the government of St. Lucia, I'm not looking at UWP or SAP, but the government of St. Lucia can do to ensure that they implement certain measures, put in place certain arrangements to deal with those lingering problems that continue to beset us?
It is difficult because of the lack of resources to solve the problem in its entirety. But if we had unlimited resources, certainly making more land available, educating people more to trust the registry system that we have. So I mean, the matter is who the land is registered to. Now, sadly, for a lot of persons, and particularly in this case, we're going back many, many, many years before there was even a proper land titling program. So there was controversy in terms of who the ownership was. And if you read the case and see the level of detail that the judgment went into, it's pretty thorough and it's pretty historical. And so it's not an ordinary case. So this one, probably more than most others, is as bad as it is, because over that long period of time, both parties were so vested in this fight, and they became extremely emotional in that regard. And I can say, I don't want to get into the personal details, but there are a lot of personal details that you add on top of that. I can say to you the result is the emotion that we're seeing. We have a housing problem in our country, and as a result of it, we what's the word I want to use? We allow ourselves to accept squatting. We become very sympathetic. So whether it's squatting on government's land or squatting on private persons' lands. And again, we see the public's reaction to the entire thing, in that which people are automatically looking at it, are going to take one side over versus another side, without really understanding the full complexity of the situation. So intervening much earlier, persons understanding and having greater confidence in our land registry system, persons who own land sometimes cannot defend their position because they can't afford a lawyer. And when lawyers see what's going on and realize the people can't pay, are not willing to put the time and effort in. So we have a legal aid department as an example, but it's dealing with even more complicated matters. So there has to be better services available to persons, and maybe a quicker arbitrary position, judicial system, to resolve some of these situations much earlier. And the reality is having now the social support for reconciliation as part of the entire process.
But in the end, it's causing a lot of bad blood among families and friends, and also people are being dispossessed of their prized possessions. I mean, I'm sure that many people who are watching the broadcast will tell you that if they own a piece of land, they want it to be passed on to the future generations, so that you could help end the cycle of poverty. But the other issue is, many people go through those problems, whether they own land or not, or whether they're going through those disputes. Don't you think that there is some kind of bad taste that is left in their mouths when they see that government after government would lease prime property to foreign nationals who are coming to our country to set up shop, to engage in business activity and so on, but they themselves, who are nationals, indigenous people, they cannot own a part of the country. Take, for example, the CIP. Through CIP, people can come in with their millions. They could make a contribution in some cases to the treasury, and they own a piece of land in St.Lucia, but it's totally difficult for so many people. How do we address this as
I'm not so sure I'm following you entirely, because again, we're dealing with very different things. So government has crown lands. In order to grow our economy, it's about the productivity of our land, right? That's Adam Smith said there are three forms of capital: land, people, and money. So all those three things have to work towards contributing to our GDP, all right? In terms of available housing land, that's very important, and that there are two entities that are going to involve themselves in that. So government will have normally a program to deal with low-income housing, because we understand that people can't afford to be able to buy houses. So it's doing what's happened in many parts of St. Lucia, in making that land available and allowing people to build on it on a piecemeal basis.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chastanet. When you're talking about low housing, low-cost housing in St. Lucia, you're talking about invariably over $100,000.
It can be, yeah. and again, I think that the world
is not considered low housing for many people in the country.
I understand, but again, the fact is that if you see how houses are being developed here, is to create a system that allows people to build as they go, right? Now we have minimum standards. So, for instance, if I take Mocha as an example after the hurricane, if we had to follow the planning standards, 5,000 square feet, okay, it would have been very difficult, because even just the cost of the land alone would have been prohibitive. So by introducing new techniques, a shared sewage system, creating a common car park, right? All those things now, by putting those services in, allowed planning to approve a smaller lot size. And then putting a footprint on a house in which maybe they start with 1 or 2 rooms, and then as they earn money, they can keep making it. The other thing is then the financing. Right, so maybe people cannot afford immediately, but we can make financing available for them to be able to do that. Now, I'm saying to you, these are all very good things, but the reality is the resources to do those kinds of things has not been there. The government has been struggling just to meet basic needs, far less now getting into the development side. Healthcare, education, security, all those things are still not even being funded to what the point that they should be. So when people say, oh, you should not be focusing on growth of your economy, you have to, because there is nobody coming from the outside, right, to give you all those things. You're going to have to generate them yourself. We have a beautiful country. There's a way in terms of developing this country in which it can now fulfill the needs of every single person. But the reality is that there is both the private sector and the public sector, and sometimes there is a partnership between the private sector and the public sector to develop these levels of homes.
But right? Why do you think, generally speaking, we are failed? Even when We had a thriving banana industry, bringing in millions of dollars on a weekly basis. We still had people living in deplorable conditions. We still have a large section of the society, even then, not owning land on which to build their homes. I mean, to ensure that they raise their family in a respectable manner. You know, people have their dignity and their honor. So generally speaking, do you think that we have failed in this regard? We have not paid sufficient attention to land ownership and proper housing on the whole in St. Lucia?
We haven't. But I'm coming back to the fact of resources. So you brought up the issue about green gold, right? In order for green gold to have worked, government forwent a lot of revenue. The banana farmers pay taxes? Do they pay duties? No, which is good, because you were stimulating that part of the economy. And then government was then spending money on irrigation, government was then spending money on research, government was spending money on the marketing, right? So the reality was the money coming into the economy and the expenditure, and in those days we didn't have a very good collective system based on sales. We didn't have a VAT tax as an example. We had an income tax. So the bananas by themselves was not generating sufficient returns to be able to cover the entire cost of what it is to run this country. And I think that I really want to appeal to all St. Lucians. It is our business to understand the economic literacy and financial literacy of our country. We cannot continue to believe that we're going to let other persons make the decisions. We're not going to understand the parameters in which they're making those decisions, and therefore complain after the fact. So I want you to think of the country like your household. You have to earn enough income to pay all the expenses you have. And ideally, you want to earn enough income in which you can save money. So if something happens, that you have extra money by yourself without having to borrow money to go out and beg, to be able to do that. That's ideally what we would want.
But what if you're in an environment where up to now there's talk of a need for minimum wage, livable wage, etc. I mean, in the UK, there's a particular government minister who was under fire because she's saying to the people in that country to offset whatever challenges you're experiencing right now with inflation, high prices, etc. Try and get a second or a third job, and that's long term. All right. But in the case of St. Lucia, you'd be hard pressed to even have one job, and there's some people who just cannot make ends meet, no matter what.
Correct.
Now, we've always learned that you can always save. I mean, irrespective of whatever job that you have, you can save. You're supposed to save at least, what, 10% of your earnings on a monthly basis. But what if you do not even have a job?
So the good thing is St. Lucians are pretty smart. You know, a lot of St. Lucians have a tremendous amount of common sense. And even in the absence of a university education, they're pretty good. And so I would say to you that the technique that a lot of St. Lucians have adopted is what I call household income. Right? Is to understand that all of us have to work. So that extra job comes from maybe somebody who's currently not working in the household going out to work. It may be a person opening up a vending shop and generating additional revenue. It's getting a root band. And I see how entrepreneurial a lot of St. Lucians are and doing that. I mean, so that's why it was so important to me to change the South, because I could see that dynamic was being destroyed. So when persons are having to migrate from my constituency to get a job up in Gros Islet in the hotel sector, they have two choices. They can commute every day, or they can move up there and come back home every now and then. If they move up there, it means that their contribution in the household and helping to raise kids, to do extra work, is lost. If in fact they're going to commute, then it's the cost of having to commute, and then the time that's lost in the commuting as well. Now, all these numbers add up. So let's get back to our housing. Government needs to invest more in housing, and it's because the government has not been able to meet that need that we become very tolerant to the amount of squatting that's taking place. And the reality is the squatting is taking place at very substandards. So if you go to the boulevard and you see some of the housings that they have there, I'm not picking his constituency for any particular reason.
Castries East, Marshall.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right? So you go there and you have to walk through people's house to get to your house. Okay, you think planning would have approved that? And that land was owned by whom? Not government, private sector. So how is it the government hasn't gone in and done the acquisition and subdivided? Because if government has to go in now and do the subdivision, many of the people who are currently living there would not be able to live there. Take Folasho. How many people own the land? Who's squatting on whether, is it government land, is it private land? And there's a big dispute. And the fact is that we keep putting our head in a hole.
But in the case of Folasho, I don't think you could consider it squatting because people were transferred from one area to that area by government. I think it's over 50 years now that this has happened. Under such conditions, do you consider it squatting when you were relocated there by government, by the state?
No, but the time that they relocated them, we couldn't do that now. We could not approve a housing development of that nature currently right now, right? So, look, this is just to say that this is a complicated issue, and it comes back to a very fundamental thing. And this is something that I hold very dear in my heart, and it's why I got involved in politics in the first place. I genuinely believe that St. Lucia, as a country, can generate the revenue to meet the needs of its citizens. There's going to be some initial sacrifices that we're all going to have to make to be able to get there. But if we remain very focused and disciplined on that, we can achieve it. We have a beautiful island. We have a lot to offer in the world. We have some talented people. So a $2 billion GDP is not going to cut it. It just doesn't. I mean, and when I try to find a number to show that that's the case, right? We developed a formula that we called output per square mile. We know that the limiting factor for development in our country is land. Okay, you can't, if you use all of your land, there is no more land to use. So once you've used all your land, you've maximized what your potential return can be. Okay? Singapore is an example which is the same physical size as St. Lucia, 240 square miles. Singapore's GDP is $365 billion. So their output per square mile, 240, is 1.5 billion. St. Lucia's output per square mile is 9 million. Now you can say, okay, well, Singapore has 3 million people, it's in the middle of Asia, etc., right? But that tells you what the potential could be, right? So if you take Aruba, the output per square mile is 39 million. Barbados is 30 million. So if we had $39 million output per square mile, then St. Lucia's GDP would be $10 billion. $10 billion of GDP is going to generate a lot more tax revenue for the government, and means that government is in a better position to provide all of those services that we require. So even as a country, Tim, there is a minimum size that we have to be competitive, okay? And competitive in my mind is establishing a minimum standard of living. I genuinely believe everybody should have a proper home. I believe that everybody's children should get educated. I think everybody should have access to healthcare systems, and I believe we all should be secure, right? And I think that there should be a strong enough economy that whatever you want to do, that you can. So if you want to work for yourself or you want to work for somebody else, that you can earn enough of a living to really propel yourself, right? So that's my ambition. That's how I would like to be, is what a minimum standard of a living is going to be. But the reality is there needs to be investment in the country because we don't have enough roads. We're not producing enough water. Our electricity costs are too high. And because of the terrain of St. Lucia, it makes it much more costly to be able to develop. But those are the realities, and we have to be able to figure out a way around it. We're spending too much time as a country picking on each other, making all kinds of false allegations, right? And being involved in politics that just takes you in a circle, rather than having real discussions on what the issues are. And in a large part, I have to say that there are many different entities that are contributing to that. I think that our civil society is not vocal enough in terms of helping raise the standard of the conversation. I believe our media houses are not spending enough time really delving into the issues and take into consideration all of the factors, rather than just dealing with the emotional side of it, the immediate political side of a story. And we're all the losers for it. I genuinely believe that's the case. I think that we are much better. We've seen people like a Derek Walcott. We've seen people like a Sir Arthur. We've seen Julian Alfred. We've seen Darren Sammy. We've seen Laverne Spencer. We've seen business people be successful. So if there's one or two people that can be successful, it means that we all can be successful. There's no barrier to our success. But working collectively is very important, and having a very clear vision as to where we want to go as a country. The changes in elections every single time says to me, as a people, we're still not very clear, and I'm not condemning anybody, but we're still not clear as to where we want to go, what values we have. You have some people who say having a job is the most important thing, and then you have other people saying conservation, and not seeing the country grow, not seeing the population grow, and not changing how St. Lucia is characteristically, is more important to me. So the world is changing. There is less empathy in the world than there's ever been before, and we're on our own, and I don't think that we've come to terms with that as yet.
So do you believe, therefore, that we do not have mature voters in St. Lucia because over the last several elections they have been moving from political party to political party? Because in a democracy, the people who make the determination whether they want you to be serving for 2 terms or for 1 term.
I wouldn't use that term to describe it. I would rather say that there is still a tremendous amount of uncertainty as to what we want.
But do you think it's a case where the problem is with the politicians?
I keep saying this: the politicians are a reflection of society. Mm-hmm. People may not want to hear that. Politicians don't just emerge by themselves, in a vacuum, and are speaking differently. We confront our electorate every single day. We confront all the persons that we have to serve every single day. So you understand the different conflicts in it. But the reality is, what are our priorities are going to be? Because we have to make decisions. You can't do everything.
So do you think that people did not look at things from a long-term perspective during the last general election, and instead focused on the minutiae, the very simple political events, singular political events that would have resulted in that particular outcome of the last general election? Because you have to take a number of factors in consideration. Yeah. 1, allegations of corruption leveled against your government. 2, the decision, last-minute decision, well calculated by Mr. Stevenson King to jump ship from the United Workers' Party to the St. Lucia Labour Party in the guise of being an independent candidate. So people have to take all those things into consideration. Or do you think they should look at it from the macro level?
I think that I'm not going to respond in detail to those things, because then we're going to get into a political debate. And that really is not going to serve us any purpose, because it really is a matter of opinion at the end of the day. I think that what I'm speaking about is there are still some people who believe that somebody owes us something. Okay, so that there is this excess amount of money, and the government is denying them access to that money in order for them to be able to develop, right? We're no different than a lot of other countries in the world. Everybody is trying to figure out how to compete. I mean, look at India, as well as it's doing, but look at how many people live at a horrible level. Look at in Africa, even with the success that's still taking place, there's still people that are suffering. Look at America. And there's still people living in abject poverty in America. There is no perfect system. What I can say, right, is that because of politics, maybe we defer some of the tough decisions that we're supposed to make today to benefit us, yes, in the longer term, because there is that pressure to be able to do that. But as a society, there's nothing for free. There's no free lunch. The evidence is there that for successive decades that we are spending more money than we're earning. And some people want to make allegations of corruption. How many cases of corruption have really been proven? How many times is it made, the statement made? How many inquiries we've had, And even though the evidence suggests that something went wrong, it's not a sufficient amount of evidence to be able to convict anybody. Okay? I'm not saying that we shouldn't keep trying, right? And that anybody should be absolved or that makes it right. Once you take salaries, $43 million a month, close to $500 million a year, it's just salaries. And close to 80% of those salaries, Tim, are teachers, nurses, and police officers, none of which are getting paid enough, and we don't have enough of them. Utilities, then because you're now running a deficit, you've been borrowing money, so all of a sudden the cost of borrowing money now has gone from, it used to be $44 million a year, now it's $170 million a year, right? Huge increase to finance your debt. Now, that's okay if what you spent the money that you borrowed on to expand the capacity of your country, that would be great. But if, like what we've done, was to pay for borrowing money to pay salaries and to pay utilities and to pay for the operating cost, you're in trouble. So there's nothing to show for it at the end of the day. We don't have a strong enough social net. So we're trying to do everything to overcompensate to help people. I think those are for genuine reasons. But the reality is that the country is not in a position right now, and has not been in a position for a very long time, to meet all of the demands of its citizens. And I think that we are not having that discussion as to why. People are being very emotional about it, and some people think that snap your finger and it's going to get resolved. So you take tourism, okay? Whether people like it or not, tourism generates the greatest amount of employment, generates the greatest amount of foreign investment, has the greatest amount of linkages, pays most taxes of the country. Now, when you speak to most people, they don't think that that's the case. They think, oh, the money's leaving, right? Yes, a fair amount of the money is leaving, but a lot of money is staying here, and relative to other industries we have, it's the most. And tourism helps agriculture. Tourism helps our manufacturing. Tourism helps the service sectors, the entertainers, right? It's only in the last 2 months, Dominica got a flight to Miami. You know why? Because they opened up 2 hotels. Right? We would not have the number of flights that we have to Miami, to Atlanta, to Charlotte, to Toronto, to Chicago, to London, to all these places if it were not for tourism. Now, I'm not telling you that tourism should be the only industry, but the reality is it is our mainstay. But we still have a society that's very anti-tourism, and it's very easy for people to talk negatively or make all kinds of allegations about tourism. We have to be more educated, we have to be more aware, we have to become more literate on the development of our country and the choices that we have to be able to make. So, for instance, in the last election, when the Labour Party said that they were going to raise the threshold of non-taxable income to $4,000, boy, there were a lot of civil servants, a lot of hotel workers that got all excited. Was it realistic? It wasn't realistic. We said it wasn't realistic.
But were you convincing enough?
No, because it's a nice pie, and people say, he can do it. But the reality, he couldn't, because that represents over 50% of the taxpayers in our country. Now, we have to go through and learn those things, but we don't have independent voices to say pro or con. We just run for the emotional aspect of it, right? So I'm not complaining about it. I mean, that's just what the reality on the ground is. But in order for this country to move forward, there has to be a greater synergy on where we want to go, right?
Let's go back to Degas. Mm-hmm. What do you think will be the political fallout for you in that particular matter? Not
something that I even think about. It's not, the politics doesn't come in to bear on this at all. So this is more of a human story. A story of an amazing community, and trying to do everything we possibly can to temper some of the emotions that are existing, and that's not going to happen overnight either. I know there are a lot of people behind the scenes working to try to make this happen. I'm not taking any political consideration in this whatsoever.
And we just had a statement that was issued by the Housing Minister, Mr. Richard Frederick, in light of what transpired over in Dougal. Let's play the statement and then we get a reaction from you.
It's a really sad state of affairs for all those families. It's a really sad state of affairs for all those families who live in Diga in Miku South, the constituency of the ex-Prime Minister. This matter, from all indications, had been before the court for over 10 years, and persons that build their houses, wall and wooden, invariably believing that they had an ancestral right to occupy. Sadly, the court found otherwise. They had gone to the rep, from all indications, they had gone to the rep, the ex-Prime Minister, who, in my view, could have done something to avoid the situation which recently transpired, but he did absolutely nothing. What he ought to have done was to acquire the land and regularize the occupation by those persons. Today, 30 families, including children, are homeless. And I mean, this is a situation that requires urgent attention, and I'm sure that from a governmental standpoint, whatever we as a government can do to assist those people, we will. But had the ex-Prime Minister done what he had to do, had he expressed the issue of humanity by the acquisition of that property and regularization of the occupation, I don't think we would have been confronted with such a situation today.
Housing Minister and Cashville Central MP Richard Frederick, what say you to the statement issued?
You know, it's very, very sad when people want to continue to play politics. So, who was the Minister of Housing in 2007? Do you know?
Richard.
Richard. Okay, so very, very easy in hindsight to suggest what could have been done or not done. As I said to you, there are examples in my constituency in which exactly there were land disputes. Luckily, all the persons involved in the land were all one family, and there was a dispute within the family, right? And the government went and proceeded to acquire the land. Even after acquiring the land, we have not been able to get all the parties to agree on how it's going to be managed. So members of the family don't want the person who got the land legally to get any of the money. They don't believe that they should be benefiting from it. This situation is even worse. The fact is that if Richard really genuinely cares, and I'm going to take him for face value that he does, find a piece of Crown lands right away and help the people out. In fact, that's what we've written to the Prime Minister to do. But understand that what he's suggesting, the precedents that he's establishing. I mean, I got phone calls from people saying, can you imagine, this man's a crazy man? I have private land in the country. People go and squat on my land. The solution to the problem is that government's going to go and acquire the land. When does government stop? What's the criteria that government is going to use for that? And you and I know, when government acquires your land, how long does it take you to get paid? Right? It's not a practical solution to the problem. We've got to find a way to intervene earlier through mediation, and help people come to a conclusion faster. But when there are people, and you started touching on it, I grew up in a household, my mother's telling me, my father told me that this land belongs to us. Nobody has any papers. But that's what they told, and they believe. They believe that in their heart. They're convinced of that reality. Problem. You have men who have children with and don't marry the women, and the women are living on family land. They've been there forever. You know what their legal rights to the land are? Nothing. And so if we're going to confine ourselves to what the legal reality is, then I think that it's going to be heartless. It's going to come across as to how this situation has come across. And I think that we have to continue to develop our country, create systems and strategies that are unique to our own culture. We have to admit we have a land problem. There are people who are killing each other over land. And we have to find a better mechanism, and that's what I'm saying to you. I would like to see it. I was certainly on the track of strengthening local government, because I think those are the issues that can be dealt. Strengthening local government so that there is a health department, there is an education department, as we do right now, but that you have community workers that can identify these things. And the local government has and understands the situation with the families. Do not take sides. There is legally going to be one winner and a loser, but we can help soften the blow, and the very important part is to eliminate the hate and the anger and the emotion that's being created through what we're seeing right now. But we have a flawed system.
We'll be taking calls in just a moment, so let me just quickly go through some issues. COVID-19, we just recorded some 141 cases from a sample of 401, positivity rate of 35.2%. Active cases 779, respiratory hospital, currently housing some 22 patients, one severely ill. We are regressing as far as this is concerned over the last few months. We had a reduced number of cases being recorded on island. What do you think accounts for this particular problem that we're experiencing right now? Because at some point in time, and you've been preaching it, there would have been a desire to open the country so that people can live with COVID. People can learn to manage, to deal with that particular health scourge, and at the same time to earn a living. The government of St. Lucia does not have many options as far as this is concerned. What do you think is the way forward?
Well, we've seen what's been going on. I mean, Barbados had a huge surge the other day. Martinique had a big surge the other day. I think the critical number is the hospitalization. I don't think what we were doing before is necessary. I think that people have come to not be as scared of COVID. Maybe they should be a little bit more scared of COVID, particularly persons with underlying conditions. You would have thought more people would have become vaccinated, but I think a lot of people have thought, okay, if COVID's done, I don't need to bother with any more vaccinations. And sadly, there are people who have been vaccinated who have gotten sick. Yeah. Now, the reality is very few people who are vaccinated who've gotten sick have died. Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately what we're trying to prevent. So I think that as long as the hospitalizations remain in check with our capability of managing that, and very importantly, that we're not seeing people get severely ill, that we're going to have to learn to coexist with it. I think that wearing masks and how we conduct ourselves, so if we do have symptoms, to do the responsible thing of staying home, those are some of the things that are going to linger with us. The continuation of cleansing. I can see that we've gone away from the hand sanitization, okay? And are the buses being still clean? Are the public air is still being clean? Okay, those were very important until COVID is gone completely.
So you're okay with the Gros Islet Friday night and also Carnival?
Look, I think the Gros Islet Friday night is a major conflict in what's going on right now. So what is the number of people that you're allowed to get? So can the United Workers' Party now have a march? So what's going to be the difference between a march and what's going on in Gros Islet? And what I'm hearing is that they want to move away from carnival, from just being a vax carnival to a completely open carnival. Look, they can go ahead and try to do those things, but understand the risk that you're taking. We still have a lot of persons, over 100,000 people in this country who have not been vaccinated. We still have one of the highest levels of diabetes and hypertension, persons with underlying condition. We have a lot of elderly people who have not been vaccinated. And when we do things that potentially can cause this to spread much quicker, understand you're putting those people's lives at risk. So given all the things, are we moving way too fast? I mean, there's a big difference between opening up our borders and where we still have practicing some level of protocols, where if you're not vaccinated, you have to be tested before you come in. The hotels are still doing a relatively good job. I don't think as good of a job as they were doing before in terms of sanitization and making sure that we have protocols. The mask wearing is look like it's dropped almost entirely, not completely, but there's been a letdown in our standards. So Unfortunately, I say to you, Tim, I don't think there's going to be any change unless the numbers go up dramatically and there's hospitalizations. If we don't see that, then I think the population looks like they're prepared to accept that and to move on. And when you add now the current economic problems, people are fatigued from COVID.
A few weeks after the budget debate, which you did not use the opportunity to make your presentation.
No, I was not given the opportunity.
Well, I mean, it was open to you, it was offered to you. It's a case of, I guess, strategy-wise, you wanted to speak at a particular time.
No. It's not for the government to tell me when to speak. There's nothing in the rules that gives the government the authority to do that, or they don't get to choose when I get to speak. I have a responsibility to the opposition and the people in the opposition who we represent to provide the best rebuttal as I possibly can. And the Prime Minister's budgetary speech was very weak. And several times he made reference to, well, my minister is going to provide details. On the first instance, I mean, think of it. Unprecedented. 5 ministers didn't speak. Ministers of government and representatives of constituencies, 5. And in the last instance, 3. The Prime Minister didn't even follow the proper procedure to close the debate. So if you go to the Standing Order Section 36, it says that if you're going to prematurely end the budget, then you must ask for a vote to do so. And that when that vote is put, the Speaker must be satisfied that the minority is not being marginalized. I was not the only person who wanted to speak. Alva wanted to speak. And the truth be told, I was going to speak after Minister King. But when I saw Alva come in, he had not been there for the day and that he was going to speak, I was going to let him speak as the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Now, when he was going to put on his light, the Prime Minister stood up to put on his light. And he is a person, in all fairness, who was acknowledged. But I have to tell you, I genuinely thought that the Prime Minister was going to get up to ask for a lunch break. It was 3 o'clock.
So then you were caught off guard?
No, I wasn't caught off guard. It was a deliberate effort on their part. So in fact, even when Alva was arguing with him that he wanted to speak, he said no. Because he now felt that he had been given the opportunity to turn on his light before me.
Let's just play the clip of part of it, what transpired on that particular Friday afternoon.
I hereby unwaveringly support the 2022-2023 appropriation bill, and I look forward to its passage and its implementation in the coming months. I thank you.
Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. In our democracy, the people take decisions and make decisions once every 5 years, or when the elected members decide that they want a change of... Mr. Prime Minister, members, this is not a game. I take my job very seriously. I looked around, and the only microphone that was on was the Prime Minister's microphone. Anybody putting on a microphone now is going to make a mockery of the House, and they will face the wrath of the Speaker. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, may I? May I?
May you do what?
On a point of order, may I?
What is the point of order?
Mr. Speaker, we're here to debate a very important bill.
What is the point of order?
That it's 3 o'clock. We've not even had one recess. We're here, 2 people alone, trying to cover all of the speeches, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Leader of the Opposition, what is the point of order?
I was expecting that the leader was getting up to give us a break. I see other members in the House who also want to speak. I would still like my turn to speak, Mr. Speaker.
I have said continuously that we are bound by the standing orders. The standing orders are clear, pellucid, and unambiguous. That whoever catches the eye of the Speaker shall be the person called upon to speak. A review of the cameras will show I turned in both directions, and the only microphone that was on was that of the Prime Minister. This is not a subject for debate. I have ruled the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance will close the debate now.
Do you think that your lingering might have contributed to this in one way or the other?
Look, the Speaker made reference to the standing orders. So go and read Section 36. Did the Prime Minister ask for a vote? Remember, he's not the leader of government business. Mm-hmm. Did he ask for a vote? Because it says in Section 36, anybody can put a vote to close the debate. But if it's premature, meaning that there are still people who have left to be in debate, right? The Speaker must make sure the minority is being not marginalized. What's this big thing about when I speak? And this whole discussion about protocol and what has happened in the past. Traditionally in the past, leaders of opposition have spoken last. And there's a logic behind it. There are some leaders of the opposition who choose to speak first, but their rules are very different in terms of how much time people get to debate afterwards. So I don't think it's unreasonable. And then to stand up and say, those people spoke and there was an election, and because he won, that what gives him the opportunity to say when I get to speak? That's not what he won. He won the right to govern the country. He won the majority in the House and helping to shape the legislation. He doesn't control the opposition. Why is the leader of the opposition appointed by the Governor General? He doesn't get to appoint who the leader of the opposition is. Why wouldn't he want? I mean, there were tapes that were shown that during my tenure as Prime Minister, when I got up and somebody stood up and said they still wanted to speak, we let them speak. What's the big deal? But you see, this is all this one-upmanship. This is this particular government's obsession with politics. And their obsession with me. I mean, I hear so many times, that I'm angry and all these things. Where? I've accepted the fact that we got lost. I don't think anybody's heard me say, it was wrong or there was cheating or whatever. I take full responsibility. The next day, I told my party the same thing. That's what the will of the people have wanted. I trusted. I was very happy to go and sit on the other side and to do whatever I have to do to represent the opposition. But I have a responsibility to represent the opposition. And that part of that is the independence of the opposition office. We're already marginalized in many ways. Do the ayes have it? We will never have it. Okay? But I have a responsibility to be accountable every bit, not to them. They don't get to choose when I get to speak. So even when Hilaire was sitting there and saying, I'm giving you the opportunity to speak in prime time. What's prime time? We're not here to speak for prime time. We're here for the records to represent what we think is good and bad about the budget. And the reality is that 3 ministers did not speak, including the Deputy Prime Minister, in charge of what? Tourism, in charge of investment, in charge of CIP. The Minister of Foreign Affairs did not speak. The Minister of Housing, who likes to speak, didn't get to speak. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Housing did not speak at any part of the budget debate, whether it was in the estimates or in the appropriations bill. Is that usual? Why was that? That was done simply to try to embarrass me. But I can say to you, there's no level of embarrassment that the government can place on me, because this is not about Alan Chastanet, about the people of this country. And despite how humiliating or whatever they want to say or how uncomfortable they want to make the situation, it has no effect on me, Tim. Zero. I'm there for a much different cause than to be concerning myself with the childish games that this government is. The reality is that this government needs to govern and stop making excuses. And that's why I said in the speech I made, what they've been doing is copying everything. Even their slogan, putting people first, is a copy. Copy from Bill Clinton's campaign. Everything about them. There's nothing original. And the reality is that they don't even understand what they're copying. And that's why I think that this country is going to be in trouble. And I can see that we're already heading in that direction. That is the issue. You now are dealing with inflation, you're dealing with a disrupted supply chain system, in very difficult times, and how are you going to soften the blows for the people of this country? And the reality is there's nothing in the budget that showed any level of empathy by this government towards the more vulnerable persons in this society. But what you hear, even when you listen to Richard's speech on Dugar, how many times did he mention my name?
But you are the MP for the area?
Doesn't matter, but at the end of the day, he's the Minister of Housing. Go fix the problem, and then you can come and say it afterwards. Okay? The people have been, the case, they've been in government now for what is it, 10 months? He has family just down the road. He has family that are in a dispute of land just down the road from Duga. I've not seen him resolve anything. You don't get the benefit of saying these things, right, without manifesting it in action. And that's why I always used to say to people, action speaks louder than words. Right? Politicians like to do this. That's all that is blah, 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 blah. But is there a consistent pattern of behavior? Is there a consistent policy? So this is not the first time he was the Minister of Housing. The same Labour Party that he's member of the cabinet said he was the worst Minister of Housing ever. Question is, has he learned? And in the 10 months he's been there, he's done more things to disrupt than to produce.
You're watching Newsmaker Live. My guest is the leader of the Parliamentary Opposition, MP for Miku South. When we come back, we'll be taking your calls. Please stay with us. We are also on Facebook as well as on DBS television. Thank you so much for staying with us. That's the moment when you get to call with your questions and comments for my guest. Once again, the leader of the Parliamentary Opposition is also the MP for Miku South, Mr. Anand Shasti. We have our first caller line. Hello, good evening to you on the air.
Good night to you, team. Good night to your opposition leader.
Good night to you, caller.
How are you doing?
Very
okay.
Good.
I just want to, after the 2016 election, you won the 2016 election. We saw that the former economic minister went to White Rock to secure some equipment and materials. So I just want to know, at this present moment, where are the materials and equipment for St. Jude is located at this present moment? Okay. I'll be listening of it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Well, I think that we were asking the same question. So, I mean, you had a huge warehouse at St. Jude's. Why was the material being stored all around the island? So whatever material was recovered was put into the warehouse, and it's there. And some of it was used during the COVID period. So if you remember, we had to retrofit the Victoria Hospital. So some of the equipment and some of the material was used for that project as well. But all of it is accounted for.
We have a call. Good evening to you, Newsmaker Live. You on the air?
Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good, sir.
How are you doing, Tim?
Good evening to you, God. I'm okay.
Mr. Chastanet, how are you doing? You look very refreshed and everything tonight.
Thank you very much. I'm feeling good.
I want to ask you a pointed question. There is a patois saying, Mr. Chastanet, tant fait tant, tant quitté tant.
You're going to have to translate for me.
Host to explain what that means.
No, caller. You have made the point. No, you explain.
Okay. But let me move on to him. Let me move on to him before you can.
You're not going to explain to me?
I want to ask the former Prime Minister. Isn't it amazing how, and I like your look tonight, you look refreshed, well rested and everything.
Caller, get to the point.
I'm getting to the point. How being in opposition, how the electorate gains respect. How long does it take a politician to understand that the electorate, the same electorate that everybody in opposition depends on, they are the ones who are in charge? And who respects them, and when do we respect them? Don't you, former Prime Minister, in retrospect, some of the things that you have said, the way that you have related to the people, don't you think that you were wrong in saying certain things? In opposition, everything the opposition says does not mean that in essence, every political party wants what is best for the country. However, they have different ways of going about it. When the opposition speaks, like you are speaking now, we have to listen. Everyone has to listen. Did you do that when you were in government? Did you listen to the opposition? Everything the opposition did, you think it was just politics. It was not just politics, it was the people speaking. The people spoke. The posture that you had on the night when you announced the election, I wish you had that posture tonight. You see how nice you look tonight? That was the posture. It shows you that you have to come back to the people who are the bosses.
So I'd like to say, sir, that I would not like to feel I ever abandoned the people. You know, leadership is a difficult thing. And yes, you're right. The electorate is in charge. But the electorate elects a person to take certain decisions and to represent the people as best as he possibly can. So I certainly think that...
That's right, but I want to ask you
something. No, hold on, caller, hold on, please.
I think that there's a process, right? I would admit to you that the policies and programs that we implemented, we certainly did not explain them sufficiently, and we did not overcome some of the negativity and the concerns that persons had. Doesn't make it that it was a wrong policy, right? But the reality is that the evidence...
Mr. Chastanet,
caller, can you just hold on, please?
The evidence, the evidence of what we achieved was there. So you're 100% right. There are things that I wish I had not said, or I had explained more, or I had been given the opportunity to explain more. But that is what it is. I mean, I'm one person. We have one party. People are absolutely free in this society to have whatever opinion they want and express it in whichever way they want to. And the people of St. Lucia expressed their opinion in the election like they do every single 5 years.
Caller, go ahead, please.
Right. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Tim. You see how patient I've been? What I want to ask you, Mr. Chastanet, why didn't you denounce what Fortuna Belrose said, that Fortuna Belrose doctrine, that resonated in the minds of the people, the same masses, to say that because we did not support a particular constituency, that the government would not take care of us. They would take care of the people who supported their program. A government is always the government of the people, of everybody, but you didn't denounce it. You stood with her. You supported her on that. That was wrong. And today, the same Fortuna Belrose is down, forgetting that 9 months ago, you all were in office. She's parading down at St. Jude's. This is wrong. You all need to go back and check yourselves, because the electorate is getting smarter each year, and every political party has to understand that they must not take the electorate for granted. It is wrong. So, have a good night, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Just to finish off for the gentleman, what some media houses portrayed that what Fortuna said was wrong. We said it and we gave the right interpretation of what she said. And if in fact what you're saying is correct, then nobody would have forgiven the Labour Party for 361 or the affirmative action programs that they had. So I don't necessarily buy that. I think that the media had a very big role. I'm not criticizing the media, but the media had a very big role in terms of interpreting how what we said. And I want to say that the Labour Party, did a great job. Its supporters in playing the politics and the propaganda, and it's something that we're going to have to learn to do a lot better in our party.
Good evening, NewsMakerLive, you on the air?
Yes, hello, good evening. I want to address my...
Yes, can I speak up, caller?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
I want to address my comment to the former Prime Minister.
Yes.
I could say clear that I'm a supporter of the former regime, UWP.
Caller, you're breaking up. You'll have to speak up again. Speak up.
Yes, I was saying clearly I am a supporter of the former regime. Okay.
We're definitely having some difficulty in understanding what this caller is saying, so we'll have to cut off the call, and maybe let's see if we get another call that is clearer. Good evening to you, Newsmaker Live, you're on the air.
Good evening, Tim. Good evening, Honorable Alan Chastanet.
Good evening to you, caller.
Mr. Chastanet, question for you. So, you spoke about building a new St. Lucia. That was the focus of your tenure in office, and it was about elevating the standard for all St. Lucians. There's a saying that a rising tide raises all boats. And I think that was your intention, to raise the standard of living for all St. Lucians so everybody can benefit, even the poor. I don't know that St. Lucians understood what that meant. I don't think they could have aspired to what you had envisioned for St. Lucians. But one thing, during COVID, you understood that you were asking the country to make short-term sacrifices for a long-term good, and you kept saying COVID is not going to last forever. We're investing in certain things because we want to be first out the gate when COVID ends. And you told us that this growth the country is seeing in terms of GDP, the GDP growth, you told us it would have happened. You told us that tourism arrivals would rebound, even when the current Prime Minister never saw it, as he admitted to. So now we're seeing almost a 12% GDP growth. If you were Prime Minister now, if you were still Prime Minister, given what you had forecasted and what you foresaw, and what you had invested in, the growth that you had invested in, even during the darkest days of COVID, how would you be positioning St. Lucia now, benefiting from that GDP growth post-COVID, to really propel the country forward? I'll listen to your answer on the other side. Thank you.
Thank you so much for calling, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm just going to get cut to the chase. So how we managed the economy during COVID was one thing, and we knew that pushing construction while opening up the doors of our borders, the combination of those two things would bring us back. And the reality is the budget showed that is exactly what happened, that government's revenue got back to where it was in 2019. Not the GDP, but the government's revenue. Today we're dealing with another crisis, and that crisis is because of the supply chain issues, the inflation, and the pending recession, the war in Ukraine. We are an export-led country. It's very important that our economies has revenue going through it, and that we produce consumption, because that's how government generates its taxes. In order to allow our exports to continue to be successful, government has to be cognizant of what the cost of production is. So when you are allowing the price of electricity to go up to the extent it is, when you're allowing the price of fuel to go up to the extent it is, when you're putting up the price of cooking gas, you're going to be allowing bus fares to go up. All those things are going to put pressure on increasing the cost of labor, increasing the cost of production, and making us less competitive. And the reality is that with a pending recession coming, the hotels, the manufacturers, the farmers are going to have to discount. And remember, we are pegged to the US dollar. The pound is dropped to 122. So it's going to make it cheaper for people to buy other products from other countries, because we've become that much more expensive. So everything is working against us in this time. I genuinely believe that the government has the capacity to absorb some of these losses on its own balance sheet. Because if you continue to allow these increase in prices to be transferred to people and to businesses, there's going to be a significant fallout.
Hold up, I think we have a call. Good evening to you. Hello. Good evening. Okay, what was that call? Let's await another call. Once again, you're watching Newsmaker Live on DBS television, as well as on the DBS Facebook page. I mean,
it's just to continue with policies that are going to support the growth. And the reality is, do we expect prices of oil to be to increase past a year. I think that we have to absorb those losses on the government's balance sheet, pending all these things being resolved.
Hold on point. Good evening, Newsmaker Live. Thanks for holding on. You're on the air.
Good evening, Mr. Timothy.
Hi, good evening. We have some difficulty hearing you clearly, caller, but we will try. Go ahead, please.
All I look at Mr. Chastanet, he's trying to make St. Lucia like Miami. St. Lucia is not Miami. He wants to, the stores at the market is from Miami, it's a copycat. The sidewalks are the same thing. Mr. Chastanet is out there. The thing that hurts me the most and most St. Lucians is a hospital. We all need that hospital. Why would you build another hospital? He doesn't love St. Lucia. He doesn't love St. Lucia, neither he nor Guy Joseph. Why would you build another hospital and just fix up what was already there? Now you want Mr. Pierre to wave a magic wand? And inflation is everywhere. Don't stop fooling the people. Tell people the truth. Everywhere has inflation. Everywhere. We have to be smart spending. That's what we have to do. Mr. Chastanet, I don't see why. Why are you misleading the people like that? So why are you doing that? That's misleading the people. Tell people the truth. We are seeing, we are hearing the news, we are listening, we are aware of what's happening. So why would you think that it's Mr. Pierre who has to do everything? We have to put our minds for smart spending what we have to spend. You know, St. Lucia is not Miami. You're not Bob the Builder to fix everything. You're not even fixing everything. You're breaking everything. The band place where they had the band playing the band that's called St. Lucia by the place there. You break down that everything you want to break down. St. Lucia is not Miami. St. Lucia is not Miami.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mr. Former Prime Minister.
If wanting more for this country and a higher standard of living for this country is wrong, then I've said I'm the wrong person for the job. But the reality is that she spoke about the band. Did you ever go and see the condition of where the band was playing? I mean, you know where it is. You think that that's even it's not? Forget about world class, okay? It was a ghetto. So you're telling me that the way that the vendors were vending in the back of the Castries market, leave it the way it was? Leave the condition of the bathrooms the way it was? That's what the objective of any government is? Well, I want her to know that what Philip Pierre has been doing in his own constituency, I don't think that St. Lucians want that. And yes, Mr. Pierre, I have to admire him as a politician, that he's been re-elected in his constituency. And maybe you're right, and I'm wrong. But I'm going to tell you, I will always be promoting upgrading St. Lucia, always promoting to make St. Lucia more competitive. And Miami, I'm not interested in Miami's architecture, but I'm interested in Miami's standard. So why is it that St. Lucians are leaving St. Lucia to go abroad? Why is it you want to complain about the condition of our hospital? The reality is that $140 million was spent on the old hospital. Where were your concerns then? So you're telling me that it's a crime to want to have a world-class hospital? A hospital that now has the foresight of knowing a new airport is coming, a new dawn for the South is coming? So you might be right. I mean, I lost the election, and those things were being the things that we promoted. But I genuinely believe, still in my heart of heart, that the majority of St. Lucians want those same things.
We have a call. Good evening. Thanks for holding on. Newsmaker Live, you're on the air.
Hi, good evening. Mr. Chastanet.
Good evening.
Tim.
Good evening to you, caller.
I've been listening, Mr. Chastanet, and a few things. First of all, we said that we want to grow the economy, and the policies that were set by the United Workers' Party government over the last 5 years was supposed to help us pour on greater economic returns prior to COVID and post-COVID. Mm-hmm. But when we look at what the policies were under the United Workers' Party, they were policies that were not sustainable. When we look at the amount of money we spent on DSH, we spent money, but was it sustainable? Was it able to help the people to have better standards of living? And I'm sure that you had a lot of policies that you wanted, you felt could have helped St. Lucian, but apparently you were not in touch with what the people were asking for. So what you wanted to give to the people was not consistent with what the people were asking for. When we look at how much money has been spent all over the place doing so many different things, and it didn't help the people's standard of living.
So I want to answer. I want to answer your question. Could you just? Well,
I want to just now.
No. I just want to help you. I don't want to cut you. I just want to help you because I want to answer your question. Okay. So when you say that we were spending on things like that, if you can be a little bit more detailed, so I can provide an answer.
More specific.
That we spend money on things like DSH. You know, we spent a lot of money. We built roads. We relocated the dam. We did so many of these things, but were they sustainable? Do you think, looking back in retrospect, do you think it was the best thing to spend all of that money to develop that product where people had so many other things that they were deprived of? So I'm saying that in as much as, yes.
Sorry. They were deprived of.
And we said, okay, we never finished St. Jude's, which was a burning issue for the government. We all knew that. We heard guys say if they cannot finish St. Jude's, they should not run another election. So we knew that the government understood that people wanted a better hospital or better health care in the South. Okay? When we look at the amount of money we spent on people like Ojo Labs, what was the contribution of Ojo Labs to the people of this country? Apart from, you said, okay, you were employing people, but at what cost? Was Ojo Labs a sustainable product or project? So when you look back, I mean, there needs to be some level of introspection to say, did the projects we what we undertook whilst we were in government, did it help this country? And if I were to come back as a prime minister, would I initiate these same projects? Because, I mean, there are some fundamental flaws. People were talking, we were all talking, I was talking, and I know you know my voice, but you never listened. And had you listened, today we would not be here discussing what we're discussing today. Because had you listened, you may have had some good intentions, I'm not saying no, but you didn't listen. And your objectives have to be in sync with that of the people that you represent. Okay? So I'm saying, look back, introspect, see where you are, see what Philippia is doing, and see if you felt that you could have done it better, because people felt stifled. People felt that your leadership and your style of governance was not enhancing and did not give us the breathing space that we required.
So let me ask you, caller.
So let's not blame.
Let me ask you.
Yeah.
If he did everything that you suggested there, and Mr. Stephenson King defected, that would not have made a difference in your mind.
I really wanted you not to go there.
No, I just
didn't want you to go there.
Caller, just ask.
Mr. Stephenson King did not defect because of all what.
No. But listen, caller, listen. Caller, I ask you. No, hold on, caller. Hold on.
Alan Chastanet.
Hold on, caller. Hold on.
Respect for people who were senior to him.
Okay, all right. I ask you. Caller, I ask you a specific question.
Look at him. He's there.
Caller. Caller,
you how disrespectful you.
Caller, let's have a sensible discussion. You made a point. So
a sensible discussion, team.
But I'm asking you a specific question.
That Stephenson King part. Stephenson King defected because Alan didn't do what he had to do.
Okay. All right. Okay.
People felt that the best breathing space we could have gotten was in Stephenson King defecting.
Okay. Thanks a lot. I mean, my question was really genuine about this. So go ahead.
So let's just, can I answer her question before we take another call? So DSH, what money did the government spend? The gentleman came down. It's true the government leased 200 acres of land to the gentleman for him to build a horse racing track. All the other land that he purchased at $60,000 US. All the infrastructure that was built on the horse racing track, he paid for it. Not through CIP, his own money. All the people that were employed was him. The horses that people keep talking about, horses before, hospitals, right? Where does that come in? How does that even a statement? It sounds nice, but what does it mean? Where is it that the government took resources to put into a horse racing track before the hospital? One has nothing to do with the other. Gentleman came down and said he was going to build a development. He built the development and was in the process of actually expanding that development to put hotels. The road that she wants to make reference to, once the decision had been made to move the airport terminal from its original location to its new location. And why? The original location was right behind the current terminal in the car park. And given the amount of traffic that we already had, and the reality is that if you built it there, it would also talked about demolishing the existing airport terminal. So the decision was to move it to the other side. And in moving it to the other side was to now change the access. So when you came out of the hospital, which would be on the junction to La Ressource Road, with the horse racing track on the other side, you can make a left now and go to Labrie and Soufriere instead of having to go all the way through Vieux Fort. So that is a complete, utter fabrication, and it's persons who have been against my party that have gone and perpetuated that story, and very successfully. There was a cry, you can't eat roads. Well, we've proven that wrong. So the reality is the construction that we undertook in 2021, 2020, 2021, and 2022 drove this economy. There was a 20% growth in the economy, and government's revenue recovered, despite the fact that tourism only got to 50% of where it was before. So that is a fallacy. And the reality is, I think that there are a lot of people in this country who are much happier with the condition of the roads. And I'm proud of the fact that our government, even with the most difficult times, repaired 1/3 of the roads in this country. Only 1/3. And we kept on saying that, despite how much money we'd spent. They talk about the dam. So you're saying that the dam didn't have to be desilted? We're not the ones who came up with the idea of desilting the dam, right? We made sure that it was the right concept. It was executed on time and in budget, despite all of the rains and everything else. Critical project that we had to be able to do. St. Jude's. So yes, we wanted to finish St. Jude's before the elections. But the reality, COVID came. You couldn't get containers to St. Lucia. You couldn't get supplies. The world was shut down. There was a significant disruption. We did everything we possibly could do. And the reality is the facts are there to speak for themselves. You have Shanta King's report as to how much money was spent and why the project was not finished. And that a letter that Kenny Anthony got just before the elections in 2016. It was going to take another year and another $100 million to be able to finish the project. You then have a 270-page report done by FDL Consultants with advisors from Italy and from the University of West Indies that reviewed the entire thing. The opposition, the government wants to focus on one line at the end of the document. It says, if you wanted to have moved in, you could have moved in. But like in typical fashion, half sentence. But it's going to cost you $100 million. And we don't know structurally how strong some of the things are. And therefore, if we have to demolish certain things, it may cost more money. So again, layman, just from a layman perspective, right? The building with the blue roofs costs $140 million and still needs another $100 million to finish. The new building that you see, which is 20% bigger than OKEU, 2 floors, 220,000 square feet, open space with a modern technology to help stop the mold from coming in, to make the building much more economical to run, and with a new system of putting the plumbing and the electrical in the ceiling rather than putting them in the walls. All of those things, right? $100 million. And it would take $40 million more to be able to fully operationalize the ground floor that can fully absorb everything at St. Jude at the stadium right now. Which means that as you build your airport, if the government chooses to build the cruise ship port, as the South expands, you now have the capacity to expand. And the goal was not to break down the old building, but to convert it into a university. We know that if you can put a medical university right next to a hospital, that would give St. Lucia a strategic advantage globally. Ojo Labs, I mean, What is she talking about? So Invest does what they normally do, fix up an office space, give people a long-term rental for the office space. The government took the same NICE program, adapted it, made it the National Apprenticeship Program. So we said to Ojo, we want you to go into the South, because that's where we need the economic development. So we will pay you $1,000 a month for the first 6 months of your first 400 employees. Only for 6 months, each one of the employees. And then we'll pay you $500 a month for for the 400 employees again, your first 400 employees, for 1 year. But meanwhile, what was Ojo paying? Ojo's starting salary was $3,500. So for the first 6 months, they were paying $25, government was paying $1,000. For the next year, they were paying $3,000 and government was paying $500. And as we speak now, they're paying the full $3,500. And 1 out of every person working at Ojo makes up to $7,000 a month. So imagine, between Ojo Labs and ITEL BPO, the total salary of all the persons working there is close to $5 million a month of money being injected into the economy. Where's the bad on this? Where's the downside on this? Anywhere you're going in the world in terms of offering incentives. So I want to ask the question, Kenny Anthony, the Labour Party, controlled the South, still controlled the South for all of these years. What jobs did they create? Why didn't he build a cruise ship port? Why didn't he build the call centers in the South? Why was he allowing all those young people to go up north? Why was he marginalizing the standard of living in the people in the South? And I make no apologies. Literally every second word out of my mouth when I was Prime Minister was talking about the plight of the people in the South. I am sorry, and that's where I agree, is that the vision that we had maybe didn't translate to a lot of people. But in terms of evidence of our success, it was there. We grew the economy every single year. The revenue of government grew. The deficit went down. Unemployment went from 25% to 16% by 2019. Okay? You only achieve those if in fact your policies are working. I cannot imagine now we have the benefit of hindsight. So imagine if we didn't have COVID and we continued to see tourism grow and now we had the construction that we were going to do. How much would this economy have grew by? It grew by 12.5, 12.2% this year. Imagine how much further we would have been. So I am proud of the policies we had, and I do believe that we have to grow this economy. I do believe that we have to create a surplus. And the reality of what the person is speaking about, Mr. King has been in politics for a very long time. Okay? How is it that on the night before we call the election, he was on a TV show with me? All the things that he's talking about, why didn't he say them?
I have a final call. Good evening to you, NewsMakerLive, you're on the air.
Welcome to John Hay Broadcast.
Okay, well, how's that call? But we'll allow a few seconds to elapse, and then I'm sure we'll be getting our final call in just a moment. So please stay with us, and then we'll get the final comments from the leader of the opposition, an MP for Mico South, and we conclude with the clip that peaked. So momentarily, we will go to our final call if that person wants to make a contribution on our program as we're getting all set to conclude almost 10 minutes after 10 o'clock. I think that will do it as far as our calls are concerned. Final comments from you, Mr. Leader of the Opposition.
First of all, again, to my constituents in Mico South, but also in particular our constituents in Duga, I know how hurtful this situation that has transpired. But now is the time for reconciliation. And I want to say that I've had the opportunity of meeting both families, and there is a lot of pain on both sides. But I know that our community can rise above that, and that we can get together. And I'm really hoping that the persons who are intervening to bring reconciliation can happen. I certainly hope the rest of St. Lucia, we all learn from this, and that we have to continue to mature as a society, and we have to take our own destiny into our own hands and make our own policies to suit what our culture is. Land has continually been at a dispute, and I just want to say to people, taking somebody's life, taking a derogatory position and against each other over land The land is going to be there, but in a small community, it's not worth it. And I know that for some, those words are going to be lost. And I appreciate that, because I know when you're in the heat of the moment and how important your ownership of your land is. But the sanctity, the unity of our own community is equally as important. I also want to say that I want to continue to thank all of those persons that provide me with support and the prayers that you bestowed on me and my family, the comments you've given me. I want to welcome the comments again tonight. But just because people want to articulate a particular point, and that's why I asked the lady who called to give me details. The reality is when you start getting into a lot of the details of the criticism, then the story falls apart. It becomes the half-truth. I'm proud of the fact, for those of you who've known me for all those years, you know my favorite song, Jimmy Cliff. Action speaks louder than words. And I really made a mistake in thinking that the action that people were seeing would have overcome some of the rhetoric that people were saying. But I'm a mature person, I accept responsibility, but my commitment for my country, the commitment to develop our country, remains as strong as it ever has been before. I'm very proud of United Workers' Party and the policies that we have and the people that we have in our party. We're a big family and we're allowed to have differences, but at the end of the day we remain committed to advocating for a globally competitive education system, advocating for an affordable healthcare system, advocating for security, and advocating for economic opportunity. We're going to be going through a very difficult year. I don't agree with the government's current policy. I think that the government is showing its hypocrisy, because while they were in opposition and we were facing many of the similar constraints, they had all kinds of recommendations of the things that they can do. Well, today, government revenue has been recovered. We left them a very good plan, and I think that they can do a lot better, and are going to have to do a lot better to temper the fallout of what we're going to be seeing taking place globally. So God bless everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mr. Leader of the Opposition and MP for Mico South, for being my guest on this evening's Newsmaker Live. As always, to you, thank you so much for watching and listening to the broadcast, because if it's Wednesday, it's Newsmaker Live.